As a community, we've lived through it together, and yet everybody's story is different and affects people in different ways. And it's heartbreaking to see how much damage has been done. There's stories in town where people that can't swim, they had a swimming pool that was inflated, where they put their kids in and then hung on to tree branches until they were rescued. Stories of senior citizens sitting by their kitchen table knowing they couldn't walk out of it, and when rescuers finally came saying, "Oh, I thought I was meeting Jesus today." The stories that come out of this town will come out for years to come, with each person having their personal moment when they realized they had to leave the house and the things that came with that.
Every thunderstorm begins with a single raindrop, but trillions can follow, and all that water rushes downhill.
Rock Valley, Iowa has received national attention this weekend after floodwater
Of course, throughout
devastated
Siouxland
the
tonight,
town.
specifically Sioux County, Iowa, the Rock River threatening the city of Rock Valley. In fact, city leaders say evacuation procedures, they're now being put
Campgrounds
into
already
place.
underwater.
That's right.
We've evacuated that.
Officials are urging residents to help fill those sandbags at the city shop. They're also asking folks to otherwise stay home so emergency vehicles can access flooded areas.
The flood was happening. We knew it was flooding, but we did not know the extent.
Dive teams and swift water units were on the ground working to alert and evacuate citizens.
And today you could see that it did plenty of damage.
Of course, throughout Siouxland tonight, specifically Sioux County, Iowa, the Rock River threatening the city of Rock
Unfortunately, the
Valley.
situation here is very serious. Now, the river is over its banks in some parts. A mobile home park has been evacuated, and unfortunately, the river is threatening even more homes.
Thinking back to the week before the flood, we've had a lot of rain, on and off. Not the amounts that we got in the last 2 days on that Thursday and Friday, but decent amounts of rain. And yet, this house that we're in, that my husband bought before we got married, to our knowledge, never had any water. When big floods happened, like 2014 here, it stayed about a block and a half away from our house, and so we weren't concerned about that. That Thursday and Friday, we got about 15 inches of rain, and on that Friday night, I knew that bridges in the surrounding area probably would have some hazard. Out here on the street, on our street corner, we saw many, many trucks go back and forth to help with actually dumping sand, and trailers that came with lots of sandbags. And we stood on a corner here with a couple people from the neighborhood and talked about, okay, do we need to be worried? Not. And the sheriff's officer, even by 9 o'clock that evening, was like, you know what? We're starting to evacuate a little bit north of here. It's not mandatory, it's volunteer, but nobody was thinking flood. Nobody was thinking this was gonna be a huge problem. And so really that night, we went to bed at 11 o'clock, not really thinking anything of it. "1:30, phone rings. The neighbor's like, Ricky, you guys gotta get out. We saw water bubbling under, and people asked me afterwards, were you scared? And when I try to remember that feeling, I wasn't actually scared. It was more this curiosity of what's going on, like it's surreal. When we stepped out of the side door of our garage, we were immediately in hip-high water with current pushing. We jumped in the pickup. It was very obvious that our cars wouldn't make it out anymore because the water was already too high. So we lost 2 cars that way. And for the grace of God, our pickup made it out. I had grabbed my phone, so I called Abby DeGroat, one of the professors at Dort, one of my close friends, and said, can we come to your house? We just had to evacuate.
I remember her saying that the water was waist deep out her front door. And I had to tell her to repeat that. I couldn't comprehend that, and that seemed impossible to me. But she was saying she didn't know at that point if they could get their truck out, if they could drive out. It's by this time probably 2 a.m. Ricky and I are calling back and forth and having trouble clearly communicating to each other because we're both panicked. So at that point communicated, I'll just meet you at home. And meanwhile, I circled back to our house, which is on a hill, to meet Ricky and Sean. They were wet, so you think, not only did they evacuated through the water. There's lots of hugging, cry, disbelief at this point.
Then it's, okay, what do we do? What's happening? How far is this gonna reach? We never thought we would have water on our street. So what does that mean for the rest of the town?
We pull up Facebook, and the city has started quadrant off city blocks in different colors of people who are evacuating, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. They kept evacuating more and more sections, and eventually it was the whole town north of Highway 18. It's the whole town.
It was so what do? You can't go to bed. You're way too overwhelmed. I wasn't really worried about our property because my brain still couldn't quite fathom that we would have 2 feet on the main floor.
They didn't want to just sit around. They knew at that point, right, that they'd lost a lot. But we just all tried to do what we could.
Abby ended up getting a phone call that said, hey, we might be next in the evacuation zone from a friend of hers. And so we jumped in the 2 vehicles that we had and went to that house. We started moving things from the basement to the 1st or 2nd floor because we don't know how far this is gonna go. When we had done that, she got another phone call from one of her neighbors who owns Highway Chev. He said, we have 200 vehicles sitting here, most of them brand new. We don't know how far this water is gonna go. Do you have drivers? And so we started driving brand new vehicles in the middle of the night off of a plot, not in water yet, because we weren't sure how far that water was gonna go.
There was 2 churches that were set up right away as shelters, and so we would be driving down the highway and we'd see people walking down Main, see people walking toward the churches by the hospital out of their homes, just walking up the hill.
After that, there wasn't anything we could do because the rest of town had been, anything north of Highway 18 had been evacuated, or police weren't letting people back in, or fire departments weren't letting people back in. So we went back to Abby's house. It's 5:36 in the morning. And then we tried to sleep for a little bit. And obviously that didn't work. You're exhausted and yet worried and just unsure.
So our store is an occasional market. We are open for 3 days, about every 6 weeks. We sell handmade furniture and vintage furniture. My business partner likes to refinish and I like to build from scratch. I think we're just a good mix of old and new together.
Rock Valley, Iowa has received national attention this weekend after floodwater
This is what Rock
devastated
Valley
the
looked
town.
like on Saturday because of a levee break along the
Water
Rock.
took the trailer houses right on the road,
Retail
right on the
community
highway.
is very, very, it's destroyed. We are
pretty much at a total loss.
So when the flood hit, I'd say I probably tried to get to the store about 5 times that day on Saturday, but the current was too strong between both corners of the intersections by our store. So that first day was a lot of waiting, just waiting for the water to go down and the current to go down to just evaluate. I remember trying to prepare myself for what I would see, but actually I honestly thought that the water might not have gotten into the store. Then I opened the door and I realized it got in, and I tried to be tough and just walk in and tell myself, it's okay, as you're walking through sludge and seeing your furniture that you worked very hard on tipped over or broken or swollen or whatever. And so that was a hard moment, and then I finally just broke down, and my husband came and gave me a hug, and yeah, it was a sad day.
We were out of the house from Saturday morning until Sunday. And again, we got a phone call from a coworker that said, hey, I'm standing in front of your house. It's still standing. We had seen the drone footage that came out by the Sioux County Sheriff's Office. And our house is bright blue on the outside, so easy to pick out. So I knew it was there, and yet water was covering it. From the water levels, we could judge, oh, kitchen window, it's just below the kitchen window. First floor, meaning there's significant water in the house if the waters on the outside are that high. And you're trying to grapple with that, like, what does that mean? And it's this weird mix of curiosity and dread. And yet there's nothing you can do, you can just trust. We were able to drive into our driveway, and from the outside, not much looked different. Yes, we saw the front porch, some of the supporting walls had fallen in. We saw that a basement window had pushed in and that water was in the basement. And you could see the water line where it had been about shoulder height when you're standing in the driveway. The vehicles parked in the driveway were pushed sideways. There was a stop sign randomly, like, stopped at the vehicle, so debris had floated. Corn stalks everywhere, because, you know, we live in Iowa. The car itself had been underwater till about the steering wheel height, all full of mud. There's work to do everywhere, and yet where do you start? It's a very vulnerable position to be in, and this not knowing and not being able to do anything is actually quite hard and debilitating.
Welcome back. We continue our flooding team coverage in Rock Valley, Iowa, where cleanup efforts are underway.
Families in Rock Valley have been hard at work cleaning up their homes.
We're trying to drink as much as we can. We had friends bring watermelon in, trying to keep some nourishment in, and yeah, the watermelon helps with the fluid. Yeah, just trying our best.
The next day, friends helped us, and we emptied out the store. We salvaged what we could, put that on a good pile, and made a very ginormous pile to be dumped. After we emptied it out, I said to Noah, I'm like, we need to shut the doors because my store doesn't matter right now. We have close friends and people we know in the community that have lost their houses. And we just went to as many people as we could, and we worked as hard and as fast as we could. Hard times like this make you think about what really matters. And it makes you realize, like, go help people, use your gifts, do the things that will help ease the burden from somebody.
The type of community that we experienced during that event in the 2 weeks, specifically 2-3 weeks after, was heartwarming and a really good reminder that we are created for community, and we're not meant to do any of this on our own.
All of this, it was really some of the joy parts of it, like even the first week when we were working in people's houses, to see flatbeds behind pickups just lining the streets, to see community members from all over.
It's really humbling. You're being put in a very vulnerable situation. one of my coping mechanisms when I think back on it and when I reflect of it is like, okay, what's the good in this situation? Some people say maybe, oh, you're talking yourself into something you're just trying to make it good, or you're trying to make it positive spin or whatever. And maybe I am, but I prefer that over just looking at the bad, because in any bad situation, there has to be good. There has to be something from that. And maybe that's just a survival mechanism, or one that doesn't let you to despair. But that's what we've been doing. We're trying to see the good in that. And that's one of the things.
But I think our town and our community has done the best they can to find the bright spot and the joy out of rebuilding, and the hope that we have of knowing that it's going to be okay eventually, even if it doesn't feel that way right now.
There are days and there are moments when the loss is very overwhelming. And there are days when I can be down. One of the hardest things for me, and one of the most difficult things for me, was to go back to the house and to know that for me it was a significant loss in terms of all of what I had invested in 40 years of ministry. I lost all of my sermon notes. I lost probably 80 to 85% of my library, which was a significant loss. But through it all, there's hope.
And then there's other miracles that show up. In my case, we have a dog. And I knew in our entryway that for sure was flooded was that bag of dog food that we had just opened. And I know it's made out of canvas material, but I thought, oh man, if that all got wet, that's gonna be such a mess to clean up. But my brain could only focus on that stupid dog food. Well, when I stood in my house that Sunday, first stepping foot into surveying the damage, that bag had floated, and yet it had floated from the entryway through the kitchen into the living room, upright. There was not a single pebble that was wet. When I look back on all of that, for me, we have suffered an incredible amount of devastation. The damages to our house in our case are estimated at $120,000. And yet those little things that in the real world aren't little, I find comfort in that. And just a sign, in my opinion, okay, I'm seen and God is with us in all of this. And whether it's through that or through the hundreds of people that came through this house helping, that gave me hope. That gave us hope. So this reminder, we are not meant to do this on our own. When huge things happen, or even little things, we're meant for community.
We want to move people maybe too quickly from the mountain, and then you find yourself in the valley, but we want to move you out of the valley back up to the mountain as quick as we can.
I think what helped most is people just showing up. Sometimes you don't have the words, you don't know what to say, and that's not the important thing. And maybe you don't have many skills. Maybe you don't know how to run a skill saw, or maybe you can't walk up and down stairs and carry heavy things. But this idea of people showing up for us and just saying, I'm here, to give you a hug and to say you're not alone. I don't have the words, and this sucks to acknowledge. I can't wrap a pretty bow around it. I can't make this make sense. I can't tell you what's God's intent for this is, because this hurts and it sucks and it's pure and utter devastation. But when people feel like, well, I don't know what to say, or I'm not good at helping with any of that, showing up anyways is the thing that was really appreciated.
One of the things about growing up in the Christian Reformed Dutch community is that I don't think we're real good about sharing stories. We're just not. Those are the stories that we need to do a much better job of being able to share.